All right, folks, we'll go ahead and get started here. Hello and welcome to the 2021-2022 Great Grant Information Session for eligible applicants. My name is Wes Key and I'm with the Broadband Infrastructure Office. We're glad that you're here today and we're excited to share the program's information with you. To get us started, first we have a couple of housekeeping items. First, this webinar is being recorded and will be made available on our website with the slides after the presentation. We'll notify you when that video is available through our provider email list. If you're not currently a member of that email list, we invite you to join by visiting ncbroadband.gov/providers to get that notification. Even if you're here with us today, you still may not be on that new list. So we do encourage you to consider subscribing again, just to make sure that you get that notification whenever it is sent. Again, that URL is ncbroadband.gov/providers. Next, we will have a question and answer segment at the end of the program today. We ask that along the way, any questions that you have, that you drop them into the Q&A panel. This will help us track your questions so that we can refer back to them to inform our FAQ, as well as to make sure that we circle back on anything that we missed, didn't get to, or that we think needs more clarification. Now, to get us started, we have a special video from Governor Roy Cooper to welcome us here today.
Hi, everybody. Governor Roy Cooper here. It's great to be with you here today. The pandemic is shining a bright light on the critical need for high-speed internet access across our state. From telemedicine to remote work to education, the internet is helping people live, learn, access healthcare, and grow their businesses. We want all communities in our state to have these opportunities. But right now, more than 1 million households are on the wrong side of the digital divide. The Great Grant Program is an important step toward getting more people connected. These grants will help bring high-speed internet to thousands of North Carolinians, businesses, and farms in rural areas across our state. In addition to providing the infrastructure, we must also ensure that people can afford the internet service when it becomes available. The FCC has launched the Affordable Connectivity Program to help households pay for broadband. Nearly 350,000 North Carolinians have already enrolled in this effort, and we want to see that number increase to over 1 million, and we can get there with your help. We have a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to achieve digital equity. Now's the time to take bold action so everyone in our state can thrive and prosper. I look forward to continuing our work to close the digital divide. Thanks so much.
Up next, I'd like to invite Nate Denny, Deputy Secretary of the Division of Broadband and Digital Equity, to provide some opening remarks and to provide an overview of the division.
Thank you very much. Wes, can you hear me okay? Excellent. Good morning, everybody. Happy Valentine's Day. Happy Monday. And thank you for joining us. I would say thank you for joining us again. I know we had a version of this Thursday in which we ran into some technical difficulties. I'm really pleased to see 81 names in the attendee box instead of 81 phone numbers like last time. So we appreciate you sticking with us and look forward to working with you to close the digital divide. As Governor Cooper said, he's set a very clear priority for North Carolina's Department of Information Technology to build digital equity in the state. And when he says digital equity, what he means is the ability of all communities and individuals in North Carolina to access high-speed internet, to afford it, and to have the tools and skills they need to fully participate in the digital economy today. To that end, our organization is changing. DIT is a very traditional IT services shop, but Secretary Weaver, with Governor Cooper's direction, has set up a new division of broadband and digital equity that encompasses the old broadband infrastructure office that's been doing incredible work in North Carolina, leading broadband expansion from a public sector perspective for years now, but it's also stood up a new Office of Digital Equity and Literacy. I think it's important to say for this audience that in our view, every broadband infrastructure conversation is also a digital equity conversation. Our goal is, as we work through this grant program is to make sure we're never losing sight of the challenge of affording high-speed internet or the needs of folks across North Carolina who don't have the skills to use the internet, to keep the importance of cybersecurity and privacy in mind as they engage online, and to make sure that folks have the devices, the laptops and tablets that they need. On the screen, you'll see, and I'll be very quick here before handing it over to the real experts, but the metrics for success that Governor Cooper has handed to us. We want, by 2025, we want 98% of North Carolinian households to have access to a high-speed internet connection. We want 80% to have subscribed, and we don't just want an 80% average in North Carolina. We want to make sure that different demographic groups are all able to take advantage of these investments. Right now in North Carolina, about 76% of white households subscribe to high-speed internet, but Black, Latino, and Native American households all lag considerably behind. Our goal is to get each of these groups to 80%. And perhaps most importantly, we want 100% of households with school children at home to subscribe to broadband. We want to permanently close the homework gap in North Carolina. So I say all this just to say, as we work with you through the GREAT Grant program and subsequent programs like the CAB, Completing Access to Broadband, and other programs that the Governor and the General Assembly have authorized and appropriated for DIT, we want you to be aware of these goals, and we want to contextualize all of our work in this framework here, right, of access to infrastructure, affordability, and digital literacy, the three cornerstones or pillars of digital equity. So again, let me just say thank you for all your work. I think in North Carolina, we've shown that the public-private partnership is the way to connect more households to high-speed internet. And we really value your work and look forward to working together through this program. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Angie Bailey, our Director of the Office of Broadband Infrastructure.
Thank you, Nate. My name is Angie Bailey. I'm Director of the Broadband Infrastructure Office. And before we jump into the slides, I just wanted to share a couple quick things. We appreciate you being with us again today. We're trying to actually have a lot of information sessions. There's so much going on and so many programs, and to share as much as we can and kind of keep the information flowing. That said, this is our main session on GREAT Grant. So we will be recording it and posting it online for anybody that is missing it today or needs a refresher in the coming weeks. So before I start, I want to kind of reiterate, I want to thank Nate for his leadership and just the fact that we have a full broadband division now is huge and I think needed with all this funding that's coming through. So I appreciate his leadership. For our broadband provider partners, we know you all have a lot going on. We know there's a lot of money out there. There's a lot of projects, a lot of building. And we just appreciate you focusing in on North Carolina and the opportunities with these ARPA dollars. And so we look forward to partnering with you on a myriad of projects in the coming year and years. And for our counties on the call today, we know there's a lot of pressure on you all to figure out broadband solutions. And we know you don't have a lot of time to spend always on understanding the ins and outs of all these broadband funding pots. So I just wanted to mention, there are opportunities obviously under GREAT for you all to be in partnerships with us or with the applicants. We are working closely with the School of Government and the Association of County Commissioners to try to figure out kind of the best way to get you all support and guidance on these different choices. And George Collier and I will both be on the office hours call with School of Government this Wednesday from 12 to 1. So we would encourage counties to consider participating in that as School of Government, helps us navigate these choices for you all. We'll also be on the county manager's call with the Association of County Commissioners on Thursday from 4 to 5. We do have, as mentioned, multiple funding programs, although today's session is on GREAT. But if you go to ncbroadband.gov/grants on our website, you can see kind of the listing of all the different program pots under ARPA. We obviously are rolling out the GREAT program first for several reasons. We've run it before. it is our most prescriptive program and is really meant to target our most unserved areas. So we felt like it's important to get that out, get those areas, get those solutions moving forward. We also can't easily run the GRATE and the CAB programs at the same time because the eligible areas have similarities. And so we're trying to get this GRATE round pushed out. It will be followed by CAB. Our CAB program and the future stopgap program, well, GRATE is fully unserved areas. CAB and stopgap have some language around underserved. That's not defined in legislation, but that's something that we are working on. We would love to define it as an area with less than 100 down, 20 up, as we feel the feds seem to be doing. That's something we're digging into. So that will be coming out. We'll be getting more details out on that. As far as this GRATE grant round, we don't know the total amount of funding requests that we'll receive. There's a lot of variables. We do have, the money has to be spent by the end of 2026. So there is some time. We know people need broadband now. These are complex programs. And my guess is it'll be kind of an evolution, right? With all these pots that are coming out. Another just reminder on GRATE, it's similar for those of y'all that have partnered with us in the past, similar to past rounds, except obviously these are federal dollars, and that brings with it some special requirements. So just to recap, this is about our ARPA dollars. We also have the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act money that's coming later this year. So we know that this is an unprecedented opportunity to really invest in our state, and we appreciate y'all partnering with us. And I just want to say thank you to our staff at the bio team for their patience and their focus as we have a lot of moving parts going on, and to broader DIT as they are now supporting a lot of this effort. So thank you all. And let me dig into these slides. So our objectives for today, Wes, if you wouldn't mind forwarding the slide, please. So what we want to accomplish, key points of this application round. We want to give you an overview of the NC1 Map GRATE grant mapping tool, and we want to answer your questions. Some of them are going to be better answered in writing, or maybe in our guidance already, or in our FAQ document. But we want to keep collecting your input and your questions. Next slide. And again, the purpose of the GRATE program, this is kind of the underlying purpose when it was created in 2018, is to facilitate economic development through the deployment of broadband to our unserved areas of the state. Next, yeah. And so our application window, I think you all know, it did open January 31st. The deadline for applications is April 4th. And so you can find all this on our website. If you go to our GRATE grant federal page, it's our 2021-2022 GRATE grant round. So you see those key dates of when the applications are due. Our program guidelines are posted there. They were posted January 31st. Our first set of FAQ questions or answers were posted last Thursday. So those are there. We do plan to update the FAQs weekly or bi-weekly, depending on how many questions we're getting. The directions to access our online application portal are on that same web page. And then the recording of this session will be posted, and the slides. So this is where you should go for all of that information. And hopefully y'all are already digging into it. So I actually think the timing of this, having last Thursday's session and today, is probably a good thing, because there's a lot to digest. So I'd like to turn it over now to really dig into the program to George Collier. A lot of you all know George. We were very happy that he came back to join us at the bio office back in November. And he is our infrastructure funding and policy lead. Thank you, George.
Thank you, Angie. It's great to be back in the office and DIT. I was looking at our participant list, and I recognize many names on that list, and I look forward to working with each and every one of these folks in the future. But we're only on slide 7. It's still early. Check back with me around slide 61. But no, I'm glad to be here. I'm glad that everyone is able to join us via this webinar rather than our conference call. Wes, could you go to slide 7, please. Thank you. Here are the highlights or a summary of the program and the guidelines. Since our guidelines were posted on January 31st, everyone has had a time to digest this information. So now everyone in this meeting are experts. So this makes my job a lot easier. But in any case, the source of these funds are from the Federal American Rescue Plan Act. The guidelines were developed under Section 38.4A of North Carolina Session Law 2021-180 and the U.S. Treasury guidance for the state fiscal recovery funds and the capital project funds. For this round, there's approximately $350 million in available funds between the federal state fiscal recovery funds and the capital project funds. The only legal applicant and eligible recipient for these funds are a private internet service provider or a cooperatively organized entity as defined in our authorizing legislation. Only unserved areas without access to 25 megabits download and 3 megabits upload speeds are eligible for funding from this program. Projects must fall within an eligible economically distressed county, which are Tier 1, 2, and rural census tracts in Tier 3 counties. It's important to note that if a county has utilized federal funding for broadband infrastructure on or after May 1st, 2021, shall be ineligible. We've interpreted federal funding to mean a county's use of local fiscal recovery funds from ARPA. And then I also like to refer you all to page 12 of our guidance document for more information. Single grant award cannot exceed $4 million. Awards for projects in any one county cannot exceed $8 million. And there is a defined scoring criteria. Matching funds are required. There's also a speed requirement in this round of funding. And there's a 5-year service agreement. And we'll discuss all of these items later on in our presentation. Next slide, please. As stated earlier, this application round is funded through the federal ARPA funds split between the state fiscal recovery funds and capital project funds as detailed in North Carolina Session Law 2021-180 and the corresponding committee report. Our intent is to award as many projects as we can from the state fiscal recovery funds, and whatever is remaining will be funded from the capital project funds. For the purpose of this slide and the following slide, I want to stress the importance of the source of funds. I mean, there are federal requirements associated with these funds, and applicants should take note of the references in the guidance document. Next slide, please. If awarded funds, applicants will be held to the standards of applicable state and federal law in the contracting agreement. All applicants should consult their professional advisor or counsel regarding specific questions about the governing legislation. So these last 2 slides were just highlights of some of the compliance requirements, and we'll talk more about this later in our presentation. Next slide, please. Pages 32 through 34 of our guidance document include a set of program definitions. Throughout the guidance document, there are provisions that were written into the authorizing legislation for our program. Next slide, please. Section 38.4A of Session Law 2021-180 updated the terms on this slide specifically for this application round. And I would also refer you all to our guidance document. Next slide, please. The following provisions or procedures were updated in the same section, Section 38.4A of Session Law 2021-180. Applicants must take careful note to follow the guidance document regarding these provisions and procedures. And we'll be discussing these provisions throughout our presentation. Next slide, please. So if you already didn't know, or if you didn't already know or realize, the Great Grant Program's authorizing legislation is very prescriptive. And eligible project and activities are defined in our legislation. Next slide, please. So I'm going to read these verbatim, so bear with me. An eligible project is a discrete and specific project located in an unserved area of an economically distressed county seeking to provide broadband service to prospective broadband recipients. Next slide. Eligible projects do not include middle mile, backhaul, and other similar projects not directed at broadband service to end users. Next slide. If a contiguous project area crosses from one eligible county into one or more eligible adjacent counties for the purposes of this section, the project shall be deemed to be located in the county where the greatest number of unserved households are proposed to be served. Next slide. So eligible costs for our program. This is also defined in our legislation. This is a cost directly related to the construction of broadband infrastructure and extension of service for an eligible project, such as easements, materials, construction, installation, testing. Next slide. Ineligible costs. We can't pay for overhead or administrative costs in this program. No recurring operating costs or maintenance. And then if backhaul infrastructure that does not serve last mile service towards specific end users are not eligible. And towers. However, towers may be eligible, but applicants are encouraged to utilize vertical assets already in place or easily installed as much as possible. Next slide, please. As I stated earlier, there's a five-year service agreement in this program. We have 2 periods within that 5-year term, what we call a deployment project period or a construction period. This is 2 years from the effective date of the grant agreement. Then we also have a maintenance period. So following the deployment phase, service must continue to be made available to those households and businesses for the remainder of the 5-year agreement period. So now I'll turn our presentation over to my director, Angie Bailey.
All right, sorry about that. Thank you, George. You know, the foundation, as I think everybody knows, of these broadband infrastructure programs and investments is really mapping. And we know that our country doesn't have very granular, exceedingly granular data on broadband availability. You know, that's something that the FCC is working on. It's something that we're working on. You know, the foundation of our data is still the FCC census blocks from Form 477 data. We have added in our NC broadband survey data, which we have been pushing for the past really couple of years. And we are allowing applicants to submit areas where they have additional data of their own for as long as they mention and explain the methodology. So that's, I just kind of wanted to say that before we dig into these slides. Next slide, please, Wes. Okay, so what are the eligible areas? So broadband service in the Great Grant is defined as areas terrestrially deployed internet access service that delivers transmission speeds of at least 25.3. And so therefore the areas that are eligible are areas without that service, right? So areas without internet providing transmission speeds of 25.3. Applicants, you all identify the areas that you wish to apply to serve. You can apply by, well, really it's, you can use the fully unserved census blocks or portions of census blocks, but the data has to be submitted at the location level. And one thing we've added to our definitions is the term reliably. So that's a term we see in our federal legislation around the ARPA dollars. And reliably, you can look it up in the federal rules, and it's written out in our guidance document as well. It's essentially saying that the service needs to be provided in a reliable way in order for an area to count as being served. So if that's not happening, then we would argue that the area is unserved. So please keep that concept in mind as you're working on your applications. Next slide, please. So where to start? And Ben Shelton from our Center for Geographic Information and Analysis is going to jump on in a minute and talk about our mapping tool. But you know, essentially the data that's provided in that tool, the census block boundaries and the eligible economically distressed counties, and these are the census blocks with less than 25.3 according to the Form 477 data. We have ineligible blocks. Those are made up from our eligible economically distressed counties. I'm sorry, from protected areas and from our previous Great Grant Awards. And then there's other data that we'll accept, which is in the next slide. All right, sorry about that. So other data, so when you're kind of looking at the layers that are out there, if you do as a broadband provider have other sources of data, we encourage you to consider using that in your applications. What we do ask for is for you to explain the methodology. So where did this data come from? What does it look at? And we need to understand what you're doing, why you're including these location points. And then we can actually ask for the raw data as needed. And then the other piece is that the protest process that's built into the Great Grant program, is another verification to kind of confirm that an area is served or not served. Next slide, please. In ineligible areas, Ben, I'm gonna turn it over to you in just a second. I think I have like 2 more slides. Ineligible areas, so one of those categories is called a protected area, and that is essentially when a broadband service provider is already designated to receive funds, other state or federal funds for broadband deployment. And so in that case, that area can be considered served if such funding is intended to result in construction of broadband in the area within 18 months. Or 2, for the duration of the federal funding program for that area. Or 3, if the funding recipient is otherwise in good standing with the funding agency's regulations governing the funding program. So this comes directly from our great legislation. Again, the concept is that if there's an area that's already been awarded, we don't want to be building in the same, we don't want to use public dollars to build in the same area. Just to kind of throw it out there, this does cover RDOF areas and RDOF wired projects specifically. And that's based on this legislation, especially numbers 2 and 3 on this slide. So that's something that's in the legislation. It's something that we will keep, tracking and monitoring closely as far as the status of those RDOF awards. And to be honest, to see if anything evolves in kind of this legislation or that directive that we've received. All right, next slide. And just to add, because I think we've gotten some questions on this, the reason that is only RDOF wired projects and not the satellite projects is because our definition of broadband service under GREAT is terrestrial deployed service. And so we don't consider satellite as being broadband service under the North Carolina state law. So that's kind of the protected areas. If you go to our NC1 map, NC1map.gov, we have a page on broadband mapping. We have several different, kind of a compilation of different maps, and Ben is going to jump into this one in just a second. I think there's one more slide. Wes, if you can move forward one more. And Ben, I'll turn this over to you. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Angie. So I'm just going to give a brief overview of some of the mapping data and products that we have available on NC1 Map. I'm going to share my screen if everybody can see that. All right. So NC1map.gov is, the state's one-stop geospatial solution for, providing data and access to data and applications that are, statewide resources. And primarily for this purpose, we have a whole broadband page. If you go up to the top on the home page, there's a broadband section under data projects. There's also down here, lower down, there's an initiatives page. Both places will take you to the same page. But going here, you'll see we try to give access and easy access to all the data and mapping applications that we have available, primarily for the purpose of these project planning purposes. There's the North Carolina Great Grant online mapping tool that I'll detail here in a minute. But there's also a few other data sets and cards out here. Broadband project planning will have more information from the FCC Form 477 data on like provider service coverage areas in different counties, things like that, different technologies that are being deployed in different areas. We also have the North Carolina Broadband Survey that's aggregated by the Friday Institute, and we pull the data into this dashboard for quick summaries and representations of that data. And there's some other access and adoption pieces lower down, but We'll jump right into this Great Grant online mapping tool. If you click the data button here, that is how you access all of the data sets that are in the map that we're providing. So if you want to pull these in as streaming services into your own GIS, your own mapping software, or if you want to download these data sets, this is where you would go. You hit that data tab and it shows all of the different data sets here available. The primary purpose behind this tool is really to get the address data to the provider so that they can pull the addresses straight out of that data set and give that into their applications. So we provided the address NC data set here. And just really quickly, I know there's some issues people are reporting with downloading this data. It is over 5 million records, so it's a big data set for a statewide data set. But we do provide, we're providing at the bottom of the download tab here on the left, there is a file geodatabase option. And if there's other formats that you need to download and these options up top are not working, let us know. We'll try to update this with different file formats. But this will get you straight from the server, the data set, instead of going through this hub site, and it'll be a little quicker. So that's downloading the data, but in the tool itself, so if you go back to NC1 map and go back to the broadband page, this view button on the Great Grant Online Mapping Tool card will take you right into the tool itself. I won't get into a lot of detail on how to use the tool and all the different options and widgets on this tool. But if you go up here to the top left, there's an About section. And in this link here, we're putting together a help document that will kind of go through a how-to step-by-step on how to do different things and go really into the details, the metadata, the sources, where the data is coming from, how we created the data, that kind of thing is all outlined in that help document. And as Angie mentioned, one of the primary purposes behind this tool is to kind of outline where the ineligible areas are. So in the legislation, it's clearly defined. In Tier 3 counties, only rural census tracts are eligible. And then there's, the other federally funded grant awards and other things that may create scenarios where certain areas are ineligible for the Great Grant program. Well, we've outlined all of those ineligible areas that we have mapped in gray. And so if you see a grayed out area on this map, those are the ineligible areas based on those guidelines. For example, all of these census tracts that are grayed out in Wake County and Johnston and Durham and Orange County, those are Tier 3 counties. And the gray census tracts are those census tracts that have a greater population of 500 people per square mile, which is what's outlined in the legislation as the definition for what a rural and non-rural census tract, that's the threshold. So anything that's not grayed out in Wake County is a rural census tract based on that definition. We also have the FCC RDOF awards in the darker gray here. You see those scattered throughout. And those are the terrestrial RDOF awards. And then any other federal award, kind of similar like to the USDA Reconnect awards and things like that, are also grayed out in these maps. And so take out the gray, we have also outlined what we know of as the eligible areas. It might not contain all of the eligible areas because the FCC data is census block based. So if one household reports service in a census block, then the entire census block is reported as served. So the red is a baseline that we give that are eligible based on the latest release of the FCC Form 477 data at that 25.3 threshold. And then we have these light orange census blocks in between that are census blocks where we have the FCC data is reporting as served, but we have community surveys coming in through that broadband community survey that we put out that are reporting less than 25.3 service. So we try to do this to kind of highlight different areas that may have pockets of unserved areas in those counties. So for example, if you zoom in on a particular area, you'll see the address data appears once you get below a certain scale. and the parcel outlines. We try to give this all for context. But the primary purpose behind this tool is to provide context on what's going on the ground between the community surveys and the FCC data, but also primarily to give the address data out there in a format that is easily selectable and exported out of the interface so that that can be included in the application for grade. So using this select tool at the bottom, if you select the address data and make sure that this select tool is activated, this dark green, and for example, these addresses here in this neighborhood were to be included in an application, you can easily select that data, and then going over to the menu, you can export to CSV, and that file is downloaded with those specific addresses. And it's really critical that, when we're receiving applications from all of these different providers, that the data being given to us is all coming from the same address data set. So depending on the address and the geocoder used, locations may fall differently. So to compare apples to apples between all of the different applications and to quickly turn this around and get Angie's group enough information to analyze what the application is outlining, and if there's overlap in between the applications, we all need to be using the same address data set. So this address data set is the latest address, statewide address effort by the state. This is coming straight out of the Next Gen 911 project that aggregates all of the data from the local and county governments. So we're trying to get the latest and greatest data from the authoritative sources at the local level. And using that, we can quickly turn that around, get Angie enough information, show if there's overlaps, and know exactly where these funds are being applied for and the context around it. So that's kind of the basic function of this tool. We try to provide as much information that we have available, but knowing that the FCC data is, not the most complete picture of what's on the ground as being unserved, but knowing that this is a good start, and then giving people the tools to kind of research and dive down a little bit deeper and figure out what's going on. So that's the overview of the tool. And if there are questions, feel free to ask those in the Q&A, and we'll get to those at the end.
Thank you, Ben. And I just wanted to throw out there to folks that, we've considered doing a session just on mapping. So if you think that's something that we need, or that you need, if you could please let us know. And if you want to kind of mention exactly what points you're having trouble with or need more information on, we can look at offering that. And also, the other thing I wanted to mention is that we do have an email address just for mapping, broadband mapping at nc.gov, and so we'll mention that at the end. But as you are working on your application, if you need help, that'll be the best address to use. And one last thing, Ben, you might have mentioned this, but just to stress, the document that gets attached, that's attached to the online mapping tool, the help document that does list the methodology for how these data layers work. And if we make updates to any of the data sets, live while this round is in progress, that's where we will document that.
Right. Yes. And as so the address data specifically is coming from the Next Gen project, which does get updated. So if we have major updates coming through there, we'll outline those in that help document and send that out to the distribution list if we can. And then if there's more information that's needed in that document, there's something missing. This data is it's a massive workload to go through all these data sets. So if there's something missing, we'll try to update that as we go along. But some of these data sets are kind of fluid. Especially, I think there's a question there about the survey data, and that is a live data set that gets updated nightly from the broadband surveys that come in. So as more surveys come in, those data sets will show on the map as the point data set at least.
And the NC broadband survey data is managed by the Friday Institute for Educational Innovation, and so we download from them every night. Okay, thank you, Ben.
Angie.
Wes, next slide. Yeah, so we'll turn over to George to talk about the application materials.
All right. Thanks, Angie. Thanks, Ben. If y'all are following along in the slide deck, we're on slide 28. You could also find a copy of the slide deck at ncbroadband.gov. There's a drop-down toolbar for grants, and you would go under our federal grant link. You could also find a copy of the guidance documents as well. So if you're following along, we're on slide 28. I don't know if I mentioned this, but our program is very prescriptive. Our legislation details what's required in our Great Grant Program application. There are specific requirements, and our office can also add any additional requirements that were not in legislation. This slide here, you can find a summary of this slide, a checklist, what have you, in our application or our guidance document on page 37. So this slide summarizes the required application information for this round of funding. And I can't stress enough of how important it is to use the guidance document while you're developing your project and application. These applications are due April 4th. After we receive all applications, we'll vet them for completeness and prepare each application for public posting. Preparation means we'll ensure that any information that is not public record is redacted from the public posting. And you all, the ISPs, as the only eligible applicant, have the responsibility of identifying and stamping documents that you consider confidential as defined in North Carolina General Statute, Chapter 132. It's important that I reference that because you can't stamp your whole application as confidential because we do have a public posting period. So you'll need to have your counsel or your advisors review that reference general statute to ensure that you're stamping the appropriate documents as confidential. It's a very short slide. I didn't want to talk about all of the items on this slide because they're detailed in our guidance document. So I'll turn this presentation back over to my director, Angie Bailey, to discuss our protest process.
Thanks, George.
Yes, ma'am.
Next slide, please, Wes. Okay, so protesting an application. Next slide, please. So as George mentioned, once we collect these applications and they're vetted, they do get publicly posted for at least 20 days prior to award. That's in our legislation. Next slide, please. And so the protest process, the purpose is the only reason an application can be protested is if the locations in the application are believed to be served. And so that's the only way that an application can be protested. The eligible entity that can submit a protest, now this is different as of this funding round. This was changed in the legislation over this summer. A broadband service provider currently providing broadband service in a project area proposed in an application. So the only entity eligible to protest is the entity that's actually saying that they provide service at any of the locations within an application. Next slide, please. Protesting ISPs can only submit a protest if if the project covers an area that's a protected area as defined in the guidance document. Those are those areas that where there's another federal or state award for an infrastructure project build. So for a protected area, or if a proposed project area contains 10% or more of total households with access to broadband service. And so both of these are new, especially the second bullet is new in this legislation. The 10% piece is new. And I think the intent of that is that, in the past, we could have a project with, 300 homes. And if 5 homes were, if there was the concept that 5 of them are considered served, there was no limit on, just those 5 could be protested. And so this is, the legislation now caps it at, an area has to have at least, has to have 10% or more of households that they're protesting. And I think that's to give So we're not getting protests on just a couple of households at a time. So that's that language. Next slide, please, Wes. So every protest must be in writing, has to be accompanied by all the relevant supporting documentation that's defined in the guidance document. It has to have specific addresses. So you have to, if a provider is protesting an application, they have to protest specific addresses within the application. And broadband service must be available to the exterior of the structure at the specific addresses indicated. And that's new in this legislation as well, the idea of that it has to be to the exterior of the structure. It's new language. The protesting ISP bears the burden of proof. Next slide, please. So the decision process, we receive these protests, we review them and make decisions on them with our secretary. The written decision gets issued by our secretary, and the decisions have to come out at least 15 days prior to application approval. And we share the decisions with the protesting party and the relevant applicants. If a protest is awarded, then those locations that are declared ineligible get released back to the applicants. Next slide, please. And so, yeah, if a protest is granted for a project area, the applicant obviously will be notified, and then they have to go back and revise their application. So they have to amend the proposed project area and essentially remove those any locations that are deemed to be ineligible, and then they have to subsequently revise their budget. So we're trying to simplify the processes, and we try to keep things moving, but it does require revisions of applications for any protests that are granted. But it is an important piece of helping us kind of make sure that these locations that are included are unserved. But we appreciate the kind of the additional language that's been added into the process for this round. Next slide, please. Okay. So that's kind of how the protest works, and we will be posting on our website kind of how you all would submit protests and where the applications will be posted on our website a bit closer to the April 4th deadline. So scoring and match, I want to talk a little bit about how we score these proposals. Next slide, please. So as you'll know, this is a competitive grants program. There is a sliding point scale. The scoring matrix is outlined in detail in legislation, so it's fairly straightforward. The highest score receives a priority for funding. We review each application and give it a final score, and then we verify what the required match will be, because the match generally is tied. It's traditionally been tied directly to the score. There's some variations now for counties that are putting in ARPA dollars. So George will talk about that in a bit. Next slide, please. Okay, so the scoring criteria, the matrix, which comes from legislation. It's in section 5 of the guidance document. So the opportunity to earn points in each kind of category is for partnerships, you can get up to 4 points. For unserved households in a county, you can get a range of 1 to 3 points. For the percentage of unserved households to be served, there's a range of 1 to 3 points. Unserved businesses to be served, there's a range of 1 to 3 points. Cost per household or business, there's a range of 7 to 9 points, or you could get 0 points. So please, pay attention to that criteria in particular, because if you go over the threshold, kind of the max cost per household, cost per location, then it drops down to 0 points. So that can definitely impact your score, that particular category, more than some of the others. The base speed multiplier. So then there's a multiplier that gets that impacts your scoring, which is based on the minimum speeds that'll be offered for the project area. And so these are new. These are new multipliers, new speed thresholds this year. Minimum speed of 100 down, 20 up to 100 by 100. The multiplier is 1 point, or is 1. Sorry. For a speed of 100 megabits symmetrical exactly, you get a multiplier of 2. And if your minimum speed is going to be greater than 100 by 100, then the multiplier is 3. There's also additional points for working with our community broadband playbook concepts, and additional points for county match, and that's a range from 1 to 7 points. Next slide, please. And so again, how this kind of comes together, those those top items that I just reviewed: partnership, unserved households in a county, percentage of unserved households to be served, unserved businesses to be served, cost per household. That's all your initial score. And then we take that number and that gets multiplied by whatever your base speed multiplier is. And then that's your subtotal. And then on top of that, you get the additional point or points for the community broadband playbook or the county match pieces. So that's how the scoring is done. The other piece that's really important that's new this year, this round, is that, so if an application, we don't have input on these scoring criteria. Again, it's in legislation. But if an application does not adequately explain how they can reliably provide broadband speed, the broadband speeds indicated, or the application doesn't adequately address the scalability of the service to 100 megabits symmetrical by December 31st, 2026, the whole application may be deemed ineligible for consideration. So even though that's not part of the scoring, those requirements are really important, and please, pay attention to that language in the guidance. Thank you. And then in the case of a tiebreaker, we give priority to the application proposing to serve the highest number of new households at the lowest cost. Next slide.
Angie, also, if it's okay, I also like to add, if there are multiple applications submitted in one county, the highest scoring application from each county will be awarded first. And if there are funds remaining, then Bio will, or NCDIT will award the highest scoring applications of what is remaining if awards stay within the parameters of our funding limits. Funding limits meaning awards for projects in the county cannot be more than $8 million in a fiscal year. I think that's an important important information. And I believe there's some couple questions that we received, at our great grant at nc.gov email, and questions that were dropped here in our Q&A. So I just wanted to at least answer that up front.
Because on the scoring, there is a lot of funding available, obviously, but we do have a cap at the amount per county.
Sure.
Okay, next slide.
All right.
So turn it back to George.
Wow. I didn't get my CPA certification from Thursday, and so now it's back to me to verbally describe our match rules, which, by the way, is also written into our authorizing legislation and described in our guidelines on page 22. So an applicant's match is determined by their application score. It's important to note that whatever amount of match is required, up to 50% of the match may come from third-party funding or other grants. Third-party funding also includes the financial contribution from a county, such as county ARP funds or unrestricted general fund revenue. So these are eligible as third-party funding. As we stated earlier, highest scoring applications will receive priority for funding. On this slide here, you'll see our scale, our match scale. So it can range from 30% to 50%. Next slide, please. There's a potential for a match reduction regardless of the score. If a county enters into, or if an eligible applicant enters into a partnership agreement with a county, and a county is going to provide a financial contribution, which consists of partial ARPA funding, then an ISP applicant is eligible for a match reduction down to 25%. If a county's financial contribution consists entirely of ARPA funding, then an ISP applicant is eligible for a match reduction to 15%. Now, it is important to note that even if a match reduction is warranted, the state cannot award more than $4 million for a single project. If the match is reduced and the remaining costs are more than the maximum award amount of $4 million, the applicant will have to make up the difference or revise the application. Next slide, please. So I'd like to transition to our next topic, compliance. Is the dreaded C word. You know, when I see or hear compliance, you know, I hear the beginning of Beethoven Symphony Number 5 in C minor, and y'all Google that later and you'll know what I'm talking about. So I have this vision of U.S. Treasury agents or state auditors flooding our office and your office. You know, this is what keeps me up at night, because we don't want that happening. You know, we want them to show up and be happy and know that we're compliant with all of their rules. Next slide. I don't have a lot of time to go into detail about federal compliance, but we do want to highlight and summarize some key points. So after this webinar, please review the guidance document and all the federal references. Please consult with your professional advisors or legal counsel regarding the ARPA guidance. And you'll find all of those references in our guidance document. So the first 6 bullet points on this slide are common requirements for the state fiscal recovery funds and the capital project funds. All awardees from the state fiscal recovery funds are required to participate in the Affordable Connectivity Program or provide a broad-based affordability program to low-income consumers similar to the ACP. This was a rule that was added to the ARPA final rule back in January. You can also find a reference of this in our guidance document as well. And you'll actually have all the links to all the Treasury documents. Next slide. All applicants must register for a SAM.gov identifier. Part of the registration process includes registering for a DUNS number. It does take some time to register for the SAM.gov identifier, so please register as soon as possible. But before you even do that, you have to have a DUNS number. And the SAM.gov is the System Award Management identifier. Next slide. All awardees will enter into a grant agreement with NCDIT if you choose to do so. In addition to the requirements on this slide, in addition to the proposed project area and speed requirements in the application, here's some items that will be in your grant agreement. Next slide, please. As part of our legislation, we're required to develop project milestones related to construction in the submittal of financial documentation related to the match and grant reimbursements. We'll also include any other state or federal conditions in order for us to stay compliant and in order for you all to satisfy the terms of the grant agreement. Next slide, please. Our legislation requires that this program have a clawback or repayment provision. The way it reads in our legislation is word for word here. A grant recipient shall forfeit the amount of the grant received if it fails to perform in material respect to obligations established in the agreement. Now, there are 2 specific provisions in our authorizing legislation that would constitute a repayment, and that's a failure to provide the minimum advertised connection speed claimed in the base speed multiplier, and if the applicant if the applicant claims the base speed multiplier of less than 100 symmetrical, the technology must be scalable to 100 symmetrical by December 31st, 2026. Failure to provide 100 megabit symmetrical will result in the repayment of funds. That is word for word from our legislation in section 38.4A of Session Law 2021-180. So at this point, I'm going to transition and turn it over to Wes King. He'll provide an overview of the web-based application portal, the EBS, the Enterprise Business System. He's got quite a job here, because that is a interesting system, but that is our system for our web-based application portal.
Thanks, George. Up next, we're going to dive into a little bit more of the details of what George and Angie have covered so far in terms of what you need in order to get yourself started and registered as an applicant to participate with the program. First things first, I wanted to provide a visual representation of what George was saying in terms of how to get to the information surrounding the program. Whenever you visit our website, you will see our navigation at the top that says grants. If you click that, you'll get a drop down with an option for the Great Grant Federal Program. That's the first thing that you'd want to click in order to get to the information related to the program that we're talking about today. Once you're there, you'll see a list of all the different things that you need to complete. We do sort of suggest that you follow them in this order. Each of these different items have their own timeline and their own requirements. So we do encourage you to complete these as soon as possible so that you have plenty of time to resolve any hiccups that you might run into along the way. First thing that you have to do is register a unique to you NCID. You have to complete the EBS registration form, which was previously paper / PDF, but now there is a web form version. You need to register for a DUNS number and register for a SAM number or SAM ID. First thing up is the NCID. To do that, you would visit ncid.nc.gov. A few things to remember around this registration is that every member of your organization who intends to engage with the platform is required to have their own independent, unique to them NCID account registered. Organizations aren't allowed to share an NCID, as that NCID username establishes unique to the user records for tracking and auditing purposes as you progress through the program. Once you arrive here and you click register, you're going to arrive here at this page where you select the kind of entity, the category of entity that you fall within. Here, make sure that you choose business to make sure that you're completing the correct registration that you need to be. After completing this, you'll receive a confirmation, and then you'll want to move on to registering for the EBS platform. Platform is used for a variety of things within the program. We use it to submit program applications, you submit reimbursement requests, we're submitting progress reports and amendments and a number of other items through there. For those of you who are familiar, as I mentioned, the new registration form is now a web form, so you won't need to use that PDF anymore. Some important things that you'll want to keep in mind here whenever you're registering. The first is the name of the organization. Your organization name here should be the legal name of your entity, of the entity who is responsible for entering into the grant agreement and who can receive reimbursement. So make sure that you're factoring that in when you're deciding what needs to be listed as your legal name of your entity, of your organization name, and what needs to be listed as a DBA. The next thing to consider is who might need to interact with the platform on your behalf. Just like with the NCID, everyone's required to have a unique to them registration within the EBS platform. And some folks that you might want to consider who would need access include that your authorized representative and folks that might be engaging with the platform for purposes of submitting those reimbursement requests, submitting those progress reports, that type of thing. To clarify a little bit further, the primary user of an organization is the authorized representative, and the authorized representative is the individual within an organization who can enter into a legally binding contract. Up next, you'll want to complete your registration for your DUNS number. Your DUNS number is it's required to participate with federal programs along with the SAM ID number. The DUNS number, or the Data Universal Numbering System number, is a 9-digit identifier that allows, or it verifies the existence of a business entity globally within this registration. A DUNS number is assigned based on the physical location of a business. However, a business may have multiple DUNS numbers if necessary to accommodate an organization's application requirements. So for example, those legal entity names and the DBA, you can have multiple DUNS numbers in order to accommodate that. Up next is the SAM identifier, which is short for System for Award Management Identifier. And this is used to register to do business with the US government. Essentially, an active registration with SAM.gov allows your organization the ability to apply for federal grants and loans or to bid on government contracts. In terms of process, just to sort of reiterate here, you will need to have a DUNS number before you're able to register for a SAM ID. And a SAM ID will take a little bit of time. So we encourage you to get to this as quickly as you can in order to address any issues that may pop up. After you receive all of those verifications, you have all of the registrations under your belt, then you're ready to get started. Here, you'll want to return back to our Great Grant webpage, and you'll find a link at the top that says application instructions with screenshots. This link will provide you with a PDF that dives deeper into some of the details that we've outlined today, as well as gives you an overview of what to expect once you've actually entered into the system and you're ready to start completing your application. I'd recommend, if you haven't done so already, going ahead and downloading that information now before you actually dive into the portal so that you're able to one-to-one your information there. And also make sure that you are using this throughout your application process. Then, once you're ready to get started, you'll click Start Your Application, which will take you to the EBS platform, which looks like this. And from here, once you get logged in, you'll follow those downloaded instructions and the guidance document to complete your application. If you find that you need help along the way, here's some contact information for how to reach the right folks on the team to address your specific information or your specific needs. These will be here for the rest of the webinar and the Q&A session, but they'll also be available with the slides when they're published on the website. To be notified once everything has been published on the website, we do encourage you to join our provider email list by visiting ncbroadband.gov/providers. And with that, we are going to hop into our Q&A session. Again, we do ask that if you have any questions, please enter them into the Q&A panel. This helps us track your questions so that we can make sure to document the answers and use that to inform our FAQ. And it also allows us to track down anything that we missed, don't get to, or that needs more clarification. I'm going to start working through these questions, and the team will hop in to answer along the way. I'm going to start from the bottom down. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I was gonna before you started the Q&A, I just wanted to clarify a few things. There's a number of items, a number of questions that may be similar in nature. But I wanted to just reiterate, because we are getting some questions from a number of county representatives, some of who I recognize and worked with in the past. Just wanted to be clear that the program, the only eligible applicant for the Great Grant program by our legislation is an internet service provider or a provider of broadband service or a cooperatively organized entity as defined in our legislation. A county is not an eligible applicant for the program. However, a county can partner with an internet service provider that is interested in submitting an application in your county. And like Angie stated earlier in our the protest process slides, the only eligible entity that can submit a protest of an application is an entity that's providing service in the project area. So I just wanted to be clear that a county can participate in the program, but only as a partner with the eligible applicant. A county could register to look at the application, but if we see an application coming in from a county, it's gonna be ineligible. All right. The only eligible applicant is an internet service provider.
And to add to that, George, I think that our next FAQ number 2 document, when it comes out either late this week or next week, we'll have some more details on partnerships and kind of what documentation we would require based on the legislation. But most counties that would be partners would be doing it for to help provide financial match generally. although there is an opportunity to help provide, assets or property, and that type of thing. So please look at that section carefully in the guidance. I wanted to reiterate a couple things too quickly before we jump into the questions. So we have a definition in the guidance under eligible project areas for eligible economically distressed counties. And so these are our, the county geographic areas that are eligible are tier 1 or tier 2 counties, or rural census tracts of tier 3 counties. And that's been common for some of our past GRATE rounds. What's different in this round is that, with the exception of funds expected to be expended in the GRATE grant application or under the CAB program, a county that has utilized federal funding for broadband infrastructure on or after May 1st, 2021 is ineligible. And that means the geographic area of the county. Now our interpretation of that from legislation is that the term federal funding there is meant to be the local ARPA dollars. And our understanding of the rationale behind that is that policy leaders in the state were wanting counties to partner and participate in the state programs in order to leverage ARPA dollars with both local and state funding. And so they put this restriction on counties' use of local ARPA dollars in the legislation. What we don't, and whether people agree or not, that's what it seems to say. And for our broadband provider applicants, the challenge is that we don't actually have a list of what counties have spent local fiscal recovery funds on broadband infrastructure. So that's something we're still digging into, but I just wanted to kind of mention that, as that deals with what areas are going to be eligible. So the last thing, and then Wes will turn it back over to you for questions. It does sound like folks are wanting to have a mapping session, and so we will get that planned. We'll post that on our website. I would think we should probably focus it on the use of the GRATE grant mapping tool, but then we will definitely be planning some mapping sessions specifically for counties on broadband planning as we move closer to the CAB work. All right, I'll stop. Thank you.
Thank you for those clarifications. As we read through these questions, we may find that some of the answers overlap, but we'll reiterate anything that does require reiteration. If any of the questions that or comments that were just made have prompted any additional questions, we do invite you to drop those into the Q&A. Up first question is, it is my understanding that only 50% of matching funds can be comprised of third-party funding. If the third party is a county that is using 100% ARPA money and results in the state via GRATE grant funds providing 85% of project costs, does that mean that the county's contribution is essentially limited to 7.5% of project cost, 50% of 15%? And the next question is, would this potentially limit the additional points after calculating the score with base speed with the base speed multiplier?
So the answer is yes, up to 50% of funding can comprise up to 50% of the required match can come from third-party funding. So I guess let me break down that question in the parts, right? So yes, potentially, out of that, if an ISP applicant is eligible for a match reduction down to 15% based on that scenario, then a county can only participate up to 7.5%, up to 50% of whatever that match is. Now, you also have to factor in the limitations, the grant limitations of maximum award amount as well. If an applicant is warranted, a 15% match, the state still cannot go over their maximum award amount of $4 million. So if there is a difference, an overage, then the ISP applicant will have to, figure out a way to make up that difference or revise their application to maximize that 85-15 split. That makes sense.
Okay. Next question, I'm going to reorganize it a little bit for our panelists. In some counties, different service providers are likely to propose project areas that overlap but are not the same. For example, a county that has 5,000 unserved homes, service provider A submits a project area of 1,500 households. Service provider B submits a project area of 1,500 households. 1,000 of those homes are the same. All other facets of the proposal being the same, if only one project is funded, 1,500 households will have more than 100 megabytes per second symmetric broadband service from one service provider. 500 households will still have no access to broadband. If both projects are funded, then 1,000 households will have to be funded for an overbuild. How will the state resolve these applications, and can the county work with service providers to develop complementary project areas?
So that was a lot of words, Wes, and I think there was a follow-up to the question. I mean, that's a pretty big scenario, right? But I think the crux of that question came later on when we were talking about if there are multiple applications in the county, and I would like to direct that, I'm not answering the question with a question, but I am redirecting and going to ask the question: what if multiple applications from a county or in a county are overlapping but are not identical areas? Is the high scoring awarded? I think is the high scoring application awarded? Yes, the high scoring application is awarded in a county that has multiple applications. And then if there's any money left over, the remaining application, if there are any overlapping areas with the winning application or the high scoring application, if there's any monies left over, that the next application would have to modify their project, if there are any overlapping areas with the high scoring application, if that makes sense. So that they would have to that applicant that didn't receive an award when we do our initial scoring would have to modify their application to remove any overlapping areas from the high scoring project. I think that's what that question was asking. We're not going to use public monies to fund the same project areas.
Thank you for your answer. Go ahead, Angie.
I just want to add that, if we don't get to all these questions, they will be added to our FAQs if we feel like they're questions that aren't already in the guidance or in the FAQs now. But go ahead, Wes. Sorry.
Nope, you're fine. Again, if you have a question that you'd like to ask, you can go ahead and drop it in the Q&A, and we'll get to it either during the session today, or we'll do our best to circle back around on it and get to it in the future. Next question is, if a service provider claims to be offering greater than 100 up or 100 down, 20 up service, but the NC Bio survey data shows that the provider is typically providing far less than that during the evening busy hours, will that area be considered unserved moving forward?
So for the Great Grant Program, the eligible areas are areas with less than 25.3. So I think for future programs like CAB and Stopgap and whether underserved would have a higher definition, we haven't finished developing those programs yet, but we still appreciate the questions because that helps us think through those future programs. But for Great Grant, it would have to be an area that's showing less than 25.3. And if we have speed test data from our NC Broadband survey that shows that, then yes, that would be certainly a data point.
Okay, thank you. The next question I believe we asked is, will the survey data be fixed as of a certain date, or will it be continuously updated? The survey data information is live and it updates on a nightly basis, but the other information is updated accordingly and is documented where the data is. Ben, any other details you'd like to include there?
Right, I think you covered the survey data. The points themselves do update nightly. In the map where I showed kind of the orange shaded census blocks that represent areas where the FCC data is saying something is served, but then we've received community surveys. That one is updated by us manually, so that one will take some time. So it may not reflect the survey points totally right away, but we will try to work out a system to update that regularly so that it will be updated alongside the survey points.
Perfect. Thank you. Next question is, does exterior of structure mean for fixed wire access that the drop already have been installed to the structure? For fixed wired access where the drop has already been installed to the structure.
And Wes, just to clarify, this question came in during the time of the explanation of the protest process and that new definition, Angie. So I think what our participants asking is, what does that fixed wired access mean?
Yeah, to be honest, we haven't defined that, even though that's been added to our legislation under the protest process. We haven't actually defined exactly what that means. And I think that, yes, we're going to need to add that to our FAQ document. So a broadband service, in order to protest an application, the broadband service provider has to be saying that the broadband service is available to the exterior of the structure at the specific addresses indicated. It's in the legislation. We need to further define that and add it to our FAQs, and we will do that.
And probably add that, not probably, but add that to our protest process guidance closer to the time before we publicly post our the received applications.
Great, thank you. Next question is, will state survey data be used as evidence of failure to provide the minimum advertised connection speed?
So yes, the NC Broadband survey data could be used as data points for, showing that a location is unserved, either in an application or it could be a data point for our protest process. I don't think it's meant to be advertised speeds. It really should be what the transmission speed is. And the other thing that gets folded into there, again, is this concept of reliably that's in the federal rules. So yes, those are relevant data points. Now there is, and I'm sorry, I'll just mention this since it's a specific question. In the broadband mapping tool, there are, and Ben, you can jump in if you want, but there's broadband survey data points that are, there's a question in the survey that says, it's a check mark, and you say this is the fastest speed available. And so we have those points delineated from kind of general survey speed test results versus ones where the respondent actually checked the box that said fastest speed available. So that's our strongest data point. We don't know for the others if the respondent subscriber had a faster speed available or if they just didn't utilize the check mark. That makes sense.
Correct. There in the map, there are two different layers. I've filtered it in. So the first layer shows those that have checked that box that it's the fastest available. Those are the red dots on the map that are really highlighted. But we also have a secondary layer that are all the other surveys that show less than 25.3, but they didn't check that box. We provide that as context, just in case, there's different reasons. And you can click on each of the survey points and see what the respondents did submit.
Great, thank you. We have about 4 more minutes for questions, so we're going to keep bulldozing through these things. Again, if you have a question, please drop it in the Q&A. If we don't get to it during the session today, we will be circling back around on all those questions in the future. Next question is, if you have had an application in the past, do you have to re-register for this round? So definitely a DUNS number and the SAM ID number. You will have to register if you don't already have one. If you haven't logged into the portal in the last year, you may be required to re-register an account. You'll find out essentially when you go to log in, and if you run into issues along the way, please reach out to our office and we'll help to the greatest extent possible.
And just to add, please try logging into your portal, to our portal, if you already have a login, or setting up the process if you don't, and getting your DUNS numbers and SAM.gov numbers straight right now, because we don't want any applications held up or basically ineligible if they miss the deadline because of those issues. So
Yeah,
thank you.
good point. You can actually, I think we had some questions from the other day. You can actually still access the portal, the application portal with a valid NCID. And if you've registered for authorization, the DUNS number and a SAM.gov ID is part of the application process, not the actual portal, accessing the portal process. You can, if you have a valid NCID and are authorized to access the portal through the process described here, you can do that, and please do that. Make sure that you can actually log in. Wes, I would like to direct a question. I think there's multiple questions about RDOF areas and ineligible areas in RDOF. Angie, I believe you stated that the Starlink satellite areas identified in RDOF are eligible for the GREAT Grant program. Just wanted to confirm that.
Yes.
And because I think that was a question asked multiple times. So I just wanted to at least address that before we logged off here.
Yes, and again, it's because our definition of broadband service in our North Carolina statutes is terrestrially deployed service. So we don't consider the RDOF satellite areas to be broadband service under our state legislation. But the RDOF wired projects are protected under the our statutes with that the protected area language. And again, that's something we will continue to track carefully, and there's a lot of discussion around it, and it's something we're very aware of and will be monitoring.
And with that, we are wrapping up our time today. I'd like to invite Director Angie Bailey to wrap things up with some closing comments.
Okay. Well, thanks everyone so much for participating. Please remember, we will get, we'll collect these questions that we haven't answered, any that we haven't answered in the Q&A. Please send questions to greatgrant@nc.gov, which is on this slide. It's really important that we keep these questions moving, and in a particular space, we don't have individuals answering these. We have a team that reviews them. So greatgrant@nc.gov. If you have mapping questions, if you want to send them directly to broadbandmapping@nc.gov, that would be great as well. Or you can send them to the regular Great Grant email inbox. And we're working hard to get your questions answered as quickly as possible. We know April 4th is going to be coming up quickly. We appreciate your participation, and we hope you'll have a super Monday, a super Valentine's Day. Hope everyone is exceedingly kind to you all today. And thanks for joining us.